bit slower than, okay. So yeah, I was just explaining that we're gonna contemplate death and impermanence in order to motivate ourselves for the purpose of motivating us from a Buddhist perspective to engage in the paths of liberation and enlightenment, and from a universal or secular aspect, you can think to motivate you to change your mind and become a better human being, and to lead others to achieve the same. So try to have either of those motivations for yourself. And in the front, imagine, if you like, Sakyamuni Buddha, surrounded by the masters of the Buddhist traditions, and then surrounding yourself, countless beings who are wandering around in cyclic existence, or suffering because of ignorance, and we have a kind of responsibility to help them, and that's why we start helping them with leading them in the prayers.
To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and of human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and of human beings, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and of human beings, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. The indescribable, inconceivable, and inexpressible perfection of wisdom, unproduced, unceasing, the nature of space, object of the uniquely knowing transcendental wisdom, to the mother of the victorious ones, 3 times I prostrate. Tayata Om Gati Gati Parasamgati Bodhisoha. Tayata Om Gati Gati Parasamgati Bodhisoha. Tayata Om Gati Gati Parasamgati Bodhisoha.
Sangye Jodam Zogi Chonam Janjo Badu Dani Gyasu Chi Dagi Chuju Gibe Sona Jola Penche Sangye Joba Sho Sangye Jodam Zogi Chonam Janjo Badu Dani Gyasu Chi Dagi Chuju Gibe Sona Jola Penche Sangye Joba Sho Sangye Jodam Zogi Chonam Badu Dani Gyazu Ji Dagi Chushi Gibe Dola Penche Sangye Doba Oh, it was an easy without Tanji Pamachi Tanji. Yeah, so death and impermanence. The last session, and well, we discussed quite a few things about death and impermanence already in the previous 2 evenings. Then we talked about the disadvantages, right? It's the 6 disadvantages. So that's important to contemplate in order to move our mind into the contemplation on death and impermanence. Yeah. So if you know the benefits of something, you like to engage in that particular direction. Yeah, so that's why we contemplate the 6 advantages and disadvantages. So we mainly explain it from the point of view of the 6 disadvantages. And also we went over the first route of the dying, or the contemplation on death and impermanence. And that was that death is definite, right? So we talked about that death is definite because there's no escape, so to say, right? No doctor, no place, no no medicine that can prevent you from dying. Yeah, that's just a reality. Yeah, and then also we talked about that life is actually getting shorter every day, every minute, every second, rather than getting longer. You know, that's a reality, right? The life is getting shorter. You know, the moment you're born, you get a particular amount of time, but every step you take is a step closer to death. Every birthday you have is actually a year closer to death, right? So that's a reality, you know. And then also we saw that although you can make plans and engage in certain projects, but there's so many people who die in the middle of the plan or the middle of the project, right? It means that death is definitely going to happen, and death is not going to wait till you finish something in life. It's not going to happen. And we see that often very sad circumstances that, you know, somebody in the family passes away, but there's still children being young left behind, or the mother only left behind, or the other way around, right? So it's very sad that the Lord of Death doesn't wait until the right conditions are there, right? And why does the Lord of Death not wait? I mean, that's how we call it, but death doesn't wait for us to finish certain aspects of our life, because it's beyond our control. That's what it is, right? The more you understand that it's beyond our control and what is it, what causes all these problems, then we generate a wish to be free of those kind of problems together with the causes, right? So as long as we have karma and afflictions, we're not in control over these aspects of life. You know, and that's, from a Buddhist point of view, very important to recognize and see what's the root cause of all our problems and do something about it. Yeah? So that's kind of, yeah, it's a very long-term vision, because this life, that is going to happen, and it might happen at a time that we're not ready, that we cannot change, right? That we cannot really change, but we can change our mind in order, in future states of existence, to be better prepared and to move on the spiritual path. And then over time, this being under the control of karma and afflictions, over time, there's a possibility to eliminate those afflictions. And that's, the Buddhist path is very vast, as you can see. And of course, there's temporary benefits, because if you think about death and impermanence on a regular basis, when you actually face death, or one of your family members or your friends are dying, then you can accept it much better, right? The acceptance is there. And if there's more acceptance, it's easier to deal with the issue, right? If we don't have acceptance, then we're stuck emotionally in that event. So it's very important to contemplate that also on a daily basis or on a regular basis, to prevent mental suffering, you know, because, yeah, we can prevent a lot of mental suffering if we really want to, you know, and that's just a matter of fact of our attitude or our mindset or the way we think. That's very, very crucial, because we make so much suffering ourselves by worrying about things or fearing things or anxiety, and then it's just our own creation. Sometimes we're not in control, of course, but there are periods that we are a little bit more in control. And in those periods, we have to do our homework, so to say, right? We have to make sure to contemplate and analyze things. Because if you really see how much time we have on a daily basis to do spiritual practice, it's not much, you know. There's time spent in sleep and eating and conversations and work and this, and then you have some time to meditate, and then you sit down and meditate, and then your mind is all over the place. It's distracted, right? So the actual really amount of time we have to contemplate these things is almost nothing. Yeah, so that's kind of, and then you see you can contemplate now. You have the capacity of the mind and you have the interest, but that time is running out. Yeah, so you have the countdown ticking every second. So the more you contemplate those aspects, the more you see, okay, it's time to start now, today. Why today? Because in the second evening we talked about that the time, Kasa, of death, you know, is uncertain, right? Death is certain, but the time is uncertain. Yeah, did we say that? That is definite, we said, right? Yeah. That is definite, and the time is uncertain. And why was the time uncertain? Because we saw that, that it's basically very easy to die. Yeah, that we don't have a fixed lifespan. When we're born, the moment you're born is not that you're guaranteed to have 80 years or 90 years or 70 years. There's no guarantee, right? Some people die young, some people die old, some people die before the parents, some people die at time of birth, So that means there's no fixed aspect of lifespan. And then there's so many conditions like sickness and some food with casa. If you have a allergic reaction, or with medication, you have an allergic reaction or side effects. And yeah, the body is just like a water bubble. It's very easy to die. Very easy to get a few infections or viruses, and that's it, So we talked about that the previous evening, and also 8 worldly dharmas, to move our mind in a particular direction of less interest in this life and more interest in future lives. That's what the death and impermanence meditation should bring from a Buddhist perspective. Of course, it helps us to accept and understand things better if we contemplate death and impermanence, right? We just talked about. But from a Buddhist perspective, it should motivate ourselves, saying, okay, you know how old you are, and you know what are more or less the possibilities, then you know how much time is left, right? You just calculate, right? And then you think, okay, what is it, 40 years or 30 years or whatever is left, or 20 years, So yeah, then you think, oh, that's not that much. And then you think in future lifetimes, then because consciousness is without beginning and without end. So in future lifetimes, there's much more time, than just this life. So then you think, oh, maybe I should put interest in future lifetimes because it's much longer in time. And if I develop myself correctly now, then the benefits will come over a long period of time. Yeah, so that's kind of what we talked about previously. Then today we're going to talk about the third route. Yeah, so the third route means that only what is of benefit at time of death. Yeah, so what will help us when we die? So what will help us when we die is not our possessions, is not our wealth, is not our fame. Yeah, so that's the first point, or the first reason that at a time of death, then possessions, wealth, fame, reputation, achievements in life are not really very important. Actually, they're not important at all, because when you die, a beggar that dies and a wealthy person that dies at a time of death is exactly the same, right? You leave behind everything you own, all your followers you leave behind, as we say always. So yeah, there you go, right? So the possessions of fame or reputation or achievements, and you die, and then after some time, nobody will remember your achievements, right? There's so many famous people in the world, they remain famous for a few decades or maybe a few lifetimes, a few hundred years, but then everybody forgets, So that means, yeah, this was very temporary. So that's one contemplation, yeah. One reason that at the time of death, only our mental, that's what it is, right? At the time of death, only our mental development is of benefit. And why is at time of death only our mental development, or we say technically only the Dharma is of benefit when you die? Yeah, so that's the root of the time of death, only the Dharma is of benefit. And why? Because the first reason, possessions, fame, reputation, doesn't help when you die. You just have to leave it behind, right? It doesn't help you to go in the right direction. So that's the first reason that only the Dharma is of benefit. Yeah, at the time of death, only our mental development is of benefit, because reputation, wealth, possession doesn't help. First reason. Second reason, friends and family. Yeah, friends and family, they can help us and help us to be calm and help us in the process, but they cannot go beyond when our consciousness leaves the body, right? yeah, then we have to leave them behind. So that's the second reason that only our mental development is of importance, because friends and family members, they cannot help us beyond the death, when the conscious leaves the body, you know. So, and there's another aspect. Sometimes it can be difficult if friends and family members really start, yeah, showing a lot of emotions around the dying person, and really start, no, don't leave, you cannot leave now, and you know, those kind of emotions is not very healthy for the person who is passing away. You know, so that's kind of, for us, when we with others who are passing away, it's much better to try to have a calm mind. Yeah, for yourself is better, but also for the individual, because the individual at one point of time has to say goodbye, right? The individual for one point of time has to leave everything behind. And if there's people still clinging to this person, then for that person it's also difficult to say goodbye and go, right? So that's kind of, from both sides, it can be an obstacle, as we say, right? If there's a lot of friends and family members who still hold on to the body and say, please don't go, you can go now, and be very emotional, then that's difficult for both parties, right? For the person who is dying and the person who is left behind. Of course, this is a very sad situation, but we cannot prevent the dying by getting very emotional about it, or start crying about it, or so it's always better to try to have these emotions not directly close to the person. Yeah, it's better to go later on for a walk and then cry for yourself, or cry with another friend, or you know, because if you're close to the body, for the person who is dying, it can be difficult, right? It can be difficult. Not an okay, yeah, it's just, yeah, it can be quite difficult. So that's kind of why friends and family members, they can help us to have a calm mind, because that's very important when you die, right? You try also another person, when another person is passing away, then as we talked about previously, you should try to enhance positive states of mind in that individual. Yeah, not talking about Buddhism if the person is not interested. That doesn't work, right? And you don't force anything for a person to think. You have to know the person a little bit, and you know what the person relates to, what kind of positive thoughts the person likes to think about, and then that you talk about, right? Then the person gets a calm mind, and that's much better for the to go from this life to the next lifetime, because at the time of death, then the yeah, as we say, the continuity of consciousness continues. And the continuity of consciousness continues by the power of cause and effect relationships. So if we generate positive states of mind in the individual, same for us when we die, then we activate more positive thoughts, right? So that's how it is, you know, when you wake up in the morning from a pleasant dream, and then you still, oh, nice, nice, nice. And then you read a message and you get irritated, then that pleasant feeling goes, and then other negative thoughts come and go because it gets activated, right? So that's, for the time of death, is very crucial to help whoever is dying to try to enhance positive states of mind. Yeah. So yeah, so why is the mental development of importance? Because possessions and wealth doesn't help. First one. The second one, friends and family members, doesn't really help beyond the death process, right? And then the third one, the third reason is our own body. You leave behind your own body, you know? So that's also very important to not be too attached to the body, you know? Because we know the body, if you look a little bit beyond the skin, it's yeah, it's different. Say it softly. Yeah. Because we often say, oh, beautiful body, oh, nice, oh, you know, and we think like that. But if you really look beyond beyond the skin, then actually you see that it's not that of an incredible, beautiful, nice thing, right? You know what goes in and you know what comes out, so you know more or less what's inside. And then if you look sometimes on what happens in operation, you know actually what's there, right? So we often don't contemplate about it because we you know, we grasp to this permanence aspects of our body, and, you know, but yeah, it's not that, of course, in Buddhism, we say we have a precious human rebirth. So we should use this body. We should be healthy. That's very important to know, right? But healthy in the sense to use it as a vessel for mental development. Yeah, you can do some exercise, but you can also go to the extreme of running like hours every day, or pulling muscles everywhere where you can see them. You know, you can you can go to extremes, right? We have to find a middle way. You know, you have to have a healthy body, because if you have a healthy body, then of course you have a healthy mind. It is definitely a correlation between the body and the mind, right? It's scientifically been proven. Even in Buddhism, we talk about it very clearly, especially in the Vajrayana practice, that you have to take care of this vessel, what is so precious and so supreme, you know. So that's definitely true. But if you get attached, that's the thing. You have to take care of your body, but the attachment is the problem, right? Same when we talked about previously, it's nothing wrong with enjoying things in life. Yeah, you can enjoy a walk, you can enjoy a nice meal or a nice conversation or a party sometimes. You know, there's nothing wrong with those aspects of life from a Buddhist perspective. But if you have too much attachment to those aspects of life and have too many expectations because of the attachments, then there's an issue, because then you think, oh, if I have this or I have that, then that will be happen, then this happened, and then you have it, and then there's no satisfaction, because your attachment overestimates or superimposes, as we say, qualities on an object that are not a reality, you know. And then when we meet an object and their reality is not met according to our expectations, then not satisfied, right? So that's the issue, that's the problem. Yeah? So if you have less attachment, then enjoyments are much more enjoyable, so to say. You know, so that's something important to know, right? That what is the main problem? Is that, like Buddhists, they talk about death and impermanence and suffering. They must be so unhappy, you know. So sometimes people can think like that, but that's not the thing, right? We talk about the cause for suffering, yeah, and death and impermanence motivates us to get a happier life, to get a kind of to do more constructive things with our life. That's very positive, right? So that's important to see the clear distinctions of what is actually suffering, what's the cause of suffering, and how can I live a good life playing within this law of cause and effect. That's very important. Yeah. So there's the three roots being explained. That death is definite and the time is uncertain. And at the time of death, only your mental development will be of benefit, you know? Yeah, because your wealth will not, you cannot take your wealth with you, and you can not take your friends and the family with you, and you cannot, your own body, you have to leave behind. And that's why it's good to detach, because the more you attach to your body, then at the time of death, that might cause an issue, right? Yeah. So, yeah. So in early days, you see that, right? That in certain cultures, when a person high up in the society dies, then they give all kind of possessions, or a whole, what is it? A whole kind of protectors in the form of an army, and they put it all together with the person to bury the person. And you have the pyramids, for example. Then, you know, there's in many cultures across the globe, you see that they believe in an afterlife, but they think it's still all very materialistic. Yeah, that still the body goes there and the possessions go, but the body goes without all those possessions they put together when they bury the person, right? Yeah, yeah. So and even if you die together with other people, then it's not implied that the two consciousnesses go exactly the same direction, right? Because we have individual streams of consciousness, you know. So if two people die at the same time, it doesn't mean they go together to the next life like that. Yeah. That's also not really true, because we have individual streams of consciousness, because we never dream exactly the same thing. Yeah, with people you're close to, or something like that, you never dream exactly the same thing, right? Yeah, so that means that we have individual streams of consciousness, and those streams of consciousness, they follow an habituation pattern within that continuity, or cause and effect pattern within that continuity. Yeah, so there's kind of a few things to think about. Yeah, so maybe we do a short contemplation. I was thinking on this root, right? That is that only the Dharma or your mental development is of benefit because of those three reasons, you know, to contemplate that. Yeah, because in the first meditation, you see that that is definite. Yeah, you move. Oh, I have to do something. Yeah. Then the second contemplation, the time of that is uncertain. Then it's not just I have to do something, I have to act now, starting today. Yeah? And then with this third contemplation, we contemplate that at the time of that, only our mental development is of importance, of the Dharma. So they think I should not just start now, but I should develop my mind starting today, starting now. You see, so that's kind of the results that come from those three contemplations, or should come from those three contemplations. As we talked before about that, it's important to know why we meditate on something. Yeah, so why meditating dead impermanence? To motivate ourselves. How do we do that? By contemplating those three roots. And each of those three roots have three reasons. And what kind of results should it bring? Then we talked about those 3 points. That is definite. I have to do something, right? And then the time of that uncertain, I have to do something and start now. And then the third meditation, not just starting now, but I have to develop my mind, because that's the only benefit at the time of death. So each of those contemplations brings forward a kind of intention we like to develop. Yeah, so let's give it a try. So before we start, we first do the concentration on the breath, right? To generate a kind of concentration or an aspect of the placement meditation. So we can count every in-breath as 1, and an out-breath as 3, 2 actually first. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, in-breath as 1, and an out-breath as 2. In-breath as 3, and then count from 1 to 10, and make sure you have the two mental factors present, right? Alertness and mindfulness. As soon as you hear something outside, or your mind goes to the past or the future or the evening, or then you recognize that with alertness, and with mindfulness, you bring your mind back to the counting of the breath. Yeah, so let's do that for about a minute or two. So then when the mind is settled down a bit, then imagine in front of yourself Sakyamuni Buddha, surrounding yourself countless sentient beings, focus upon the suffering of those beings and think, without really understanding death and impermanence, I will not be able to motivate myself and start training my mind. So I really have to get it inside in order to develop my mind to not only help myself, but to help others as well, you know. So based on this intention, we make a request to the Buddha in front, or if you feel uncomfortable visualizing the Buddha, you can just think about a ball of light in the nature or the aspect of loving kindness, compassion, and wisdom, right? And if you visualize the Buddha, you can make this request based on your intention to please bestow purification and blessings to get a realization of death and impermanence. Yeah. And then from the Buddha's heart comes white nectar light, or it's actually the 5 colors of light, or the rainbow kind of lights, but mainly in the bright light colors, and mainly in the white aspect, you could say. And that comes from the Buddha's heart to the crown of your head and to the crown of all sentient beings. And by receiving this nectar light, you imagine you get purified of all negative karma, yeah, and negative thoughts and obstacles that prevent you from not be able to meditating on these points. Yeah, so that it gets all purified. So do the visualization of this white light for about a minute or two. Yeah, let's do a minute. And then think you completely purified with this white nectar light, yeah, and all obstacles and negative thoughts and negative karma is completely washed away, so it's completely purified. And then again, with the same intention or with the same motivation, request the Buddha in front, and this time also the 5 colors of light come, right, or the rainbow colors of light, so to say, but now mainly in the aspect of yellowish golden color, you know, from the heart of the Buddha to the crown of your head and to the crown of all sentient beings, and that bestows the insights or the blessings to get the realizations of the path, in particular to get the understanding and realization of death and impermanence in this meditation. So do the visualization of this yellow golden nectar lights also for about a minute. So then think you completely filled with this nectar light, right? And you've completely received the blessings, so to say, to transform your mind or to contemplate death and impermanence and get the essence out of this contemplation. So then when we do the contemplation, just try firstly, briefly recall the contemplation we did earlier, right? So think that death is definite. There's no escape. There's no place to go. There's no doctor, no medicine. There's nothing that prevents us from dying. And we can die in the middle of activities in life, and we can die, in the middle of projects or plans. Yeah, so, and every moment is actually close to death then, rather than that goes further away. So see that first contemplation we did, that is definite, right? So analyze that for yourself for about, let's say 2 minutes. I have a short conclusion here to think that that's true, it's definitely going to happen. There's no escape. And then focus on that conclusion for about half a minute. And then the next contemplation we did is the time is uncertain, right? That there's no given lifespan that is fixed. When you're born, you can die any moment, right? Nothing is fixed like that. And then also that there's no really many causes for sustaining life, because most causing conditions like medication or food, that actually can also have side effects or can be cause of death. And there's so many other causes for death, like viruses or infections, So see, it's very easy to die. And then also that the body is very fragile, right? It's very easy that one organ stops working properly and the whole system starts to collapse, or there's a kind of a stroke or an infection or a combination of various things, and that's it, So see that the body is very fragile and it's very easy to die, basically. The time is extremely uncertain, can happen any moment. So contemplate those few reasons, or those 3 reasons regards with the time being uncertain for us about 2 minutes. And I come to a short conclusion here as well that sees that, you know, the time is very uncertain, can happen any moment because of so many causes that causes death and the body being so fragile, you know. So come to that conclusion. And I focus on that conclusion for about half a minute. And then contemplate the third route, yeah, where we discussed today, that only our mental development or the Dharma, our practice, so to say, is of benefit when we die. Why? Because, you know, possessions or wealth or reputation or accomplishments, you know, you have to leave it all behind, right? In a similar way, friends, enemies, sorry, also enemies you have to leave behind, but yeah, so friends, family members, you know, people close to you, you have to leave behind, right? So also they are not really of benefit when the death process continues, you know. And on top of that, even your own body, you're so familiar with or you identify yourself with, even that you have to leave behind, you know. So see that the only really benefit there is at the time of death is our mental development, right? Yeah, so come to that, yeah, try to analyze those three reasons and see and prove for yourself that it's only the mental development or the Dharma, so to say, that is actually of practice and the Dharma or practice aspects of the Dharma or training the mind, so to say. That's the only benefit, you know, rather than the other temporary aspects of wealth and possessions and family and friends and your own body, right? Yeah. So analyze it for yourself for about 3 minutes. And then come to a conclusion here, right? That, you know, that all those aspects of life, like, you know, reputation and wealth and friends and family members and your own body are not really of much benefit when you die, right? Because you die alone, so to say, in the sense that it's only your continuity of consciousness that carries on. All the other things you have to leave behind. So then maybe it's wise to train that consciousness or prepare that consciousness. Yeah. So come to that conclusion and focus on that conclusion for about half a minute. And then make a kind of determination for yourself, or a kind of a prayer that says that, okay, that's seems to me all make a lot of sense. It's better for me now to develop my mind, right? To train my mind in the stage of the path to enlightenment, if you wish, or to train my mind to become a better human being, if you wish. Yeah, so make a kind of wish or determination in either of those directions. Yeah, for yourself. And then to conclude, then the Buddha is very pleased with your intentions and comes to the crown of your head, and then the throne dissolves into the lotus, and Buddha becomes smaller and smaller, and then descends to your crown, and then becomes one with your own mind at the level of your heart. Yeah, so think the Buddha's mind, or so to say, the qualities of love and kindness, compassion and wisdom become one with your own mind. Yeah, so think like that. Yeah. All right, so then you can stop. Yeah. Yeah, so that are the three roots we traditionally contemplate when we contemplate death and impermanence. And then the disadvantages can also be used as a contemplation. We went over in the first evening. So yeah, then you die, right? So yeah, sometimes it's good to joke around a little bit about it, because yeah, for some people it's a bit kind of, yeah, it's true, right? There's a reality that's sometimes difficult to face, but if you face the reality and you can, you know, prevent it, you try to prevent it. If you have to face a reality and you cannot prevent it, then there's no point in worrying about it too much. And that's exactly why in Buddhism we sometimes talk about death and impermanence in a very casual or very kind of joking way sometimes even, you know, that okay, I didn't die yet. Or once I was in the middle of 2 train accidents in the north of India, and it's always very sad that in winter there's always a lot of fog, and then there's train accidents. So I was in between 2 of them. So I was stuck. Yeah, our train was stuck for more than 12 hours at one particular place. So then you also think, what's going on? So in the West, you will call rescue team and everything, but there is local Indians saw the train and start to make samosa and tea and then sell. So we had a lot of things to eat and to drink, although the toilets were a little bit becoming different, especially when we reached the next station later on, because we were more than 24 hours late, and there's every 24 hours is there a train on that track, right? So the people on the next station thought that was their train, but the train 24 hours after us didn't come because we were delayed by more than 32 hours eventually. So then we filled up with a lot of people, you know. So then I came to Root Institute in Bulgaria, and then I saw my spiritual teacher, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and Rinpoche said, "Oh, Namdak, you didn't die." So yeah, it's kind of, it could have happened, right? So yeah, it's kind of, that's why we always, yeah, sometimes play with it like a joke. Yeah, one of when I went to sometimes visit Kantir Rinpoche, an old master of this tradition, and one of his person in the house is, I don't know if he's still alive, but he was in those days in his 90s, right? But quite healthy, you know. And I was sitting next to him and we talked, and then he said, "Yeah, they didn't give me the ticket yet, so I'm still here," you know. So yeah, in Buddhism we talk about in a quite relaxed manner, you know, because it's a reality and we have to face it. So we cannot prevent it. So better to look positive about it than negative, right? Yeah. If you have an issue you have to face, then you cannot prevent it. Then it's just your mental attitude that makes a difference. You know, that's what we're talking about quite often. So then what happens after you die? Yeah, then your continuity of consciousness leaves the body. Yeah, so there's kind of, so we talked about previously a little bit that same true falling asleep, that the sensory perception ceases to exist, right? And then the elements dissolve. Yeah, that's a very clear description in the Vajrayana. We won't go over that here, but it's a very clear description of how the elements dissolve. And sometimes when the earth element dissolves, there's this sinking feeling. Maybe you have that sometimes when you fall asleep. Then sometimes you think you're slipping, or you know the feeling, right? So that's a sign that the earth element is dissolving, right? Because at the time of falling asleep, we have the similar dissolvements of coarser forms of consciousness to more subtler one, you know. Yeah, and then you fall asleep, and then also, you know, of course you close your eyes, you don't see anything anymore, right? And then the hearing goes, and then sometimes if you just between falling asleep and awake, you can sometimes feel the sound and going away and come, you know the feeling? So that's also kind of a sign that the sensory perceptions actually cease to exist, right? So that is involved, that is also the different elements in the body are also related with that. So that means that slowly over time, the coarser forms of consciousness, they become dormant or cease to exist. The manifest aspect cease to exist, right? And then the more subtler mind becomes more manifest. Yeah, and that happens at the time of death exactly in the same way. And then when the subtler mind of death, you know, arises, then there's very blissful feeling. Yeah, that we see that blissful feeling with the great masters. We use that very clarity of the mind to meditate on emptiness, for example. Yeah, we talked about, did we talk about those things or not? The Tukdam, or these meditation masters who can stay clinically dead, but the body doesn't decay. We talked about it now, I think, yeah. So that's a very interesting phenomena, that they use this clear light mind of death to meditate on ultimate reality, you know. But even in the near-death experience research, we see a similar kind of event happening, right? That people were brought back to life with CPR when they have a cardiac arrest. Then the doctors are so happy that a person came back to life, but sometimes the patient is very disappointed, because if the consciousness leaves the physical body, it's very light, and there's no, especially if you have sickness, there's no issue with the body, and there's this kind of brightness because of the consciousness being more subtle. It's a very intense and a very positive and a very happy experience, you know. So then they say when you come back to life, they feel stuck in the body. So that's kind of that also we see in the deathbed vision kind of research, and in the death experience research, we see these kind of similar aspects of a subtler mind that experience more happiness or more clarity or more compassion, as they say, you know. But that subtle mind is just temporarily. That's the thing, you know. It's not that when you die, you have this subtle mind and you remain in that state forever. Then it's better for us all to jump off the building and go in that direction, right? But that subtle mind is also temporary. Yeah, it's very intense, and people need that experience, they experience it. But then after that subtler states of mind comes into existence, you go to the bardo, right? So often people dream about a tunnel, for example, right? There's many kind of visions people have when they die, that when people talk about who need that experience, right? So then when the consciousness actually completely leaves the body, yeah, so the karmic connection with your body is gone, then also this subtle mind stops and becomes a more coarser, and you are reborn in what we call the bardo, or the intermediate state. Yeah, so the bardo or the intermediate state is very similar to the dream. And when we dream, when we fall asleep, the falling asleep, when the elements dissolve and you feel yourself sinking, right, and the sound stops, that kind of aspect is very similar to the dying process, you know. And then the dream comes, that's very similar to the intermediate state or the bardo. You know, when you start dreaming, then the subtler mind develops a little bit more, becomes a little bit more coarser, and then you start dreaming about various aspects, you know. So that's very similar. When you die and your consciousness leaves the body, it's very blissful because the mind is more subtle. Yeah, it leaves the body, and that's also why it's subtle and leaves the body. That's probably exactly why these states of mental consciousness, they do not have to depend on the physical brain. And that's exactly what we see in the research, right? That people experience things in a cardiac arrest, in a clinical death, when the EEG goes flat, when there's no brain activity, or sometimes if it's too many minutes, then the brain completely dies and there's no possibility for the consciousness to come back, right? But there's a kind of a play of you can play within a few minutes where it's still possible. Yeah, and in those cases, people have sometimes an experience, you know, in that state, you know. Yes, and sometimes they talk about all the similar experience. Yeah, it's many neuroscientists, they said, yeah, it's because of certain aspects in the brain, and then people see all kind of things. But all the individual experiences that people talk about, the same systematic experiences they have. So there's something that's going on, and not only something that's going on, but also a kind of valid perception, knowing what a surgeon was doing, or knowing where they put the glasses, or knowing where they put the dentist, that they see that. Yeah, they see that in the operation theater when the consciousness leaves the body, right? So that's more subtle form of consciousness has kind of very high levels of perception. Yeah, even if you go into the bardo, in the intermediate state, you have, for example, clairvoyance, and you can go to walls. You know, it's kind of, as a human, we think, oh, wow, that's amazing. But it happens automatically by the power of karma. So, you know, it's kind of, because it's kind of a very subtle body in the bardo, right? In the intermediate state, you know. And you have knowledge of what people do, or relatives do for you, or other people do for you, right? That happens in the bardo, you know. And that's why it's so important for us, when a person passes away, to light a candle for that person, or to light some incense for that person, or to make prayers for that person, or to engage in practices to enhance positive states of mind in this intermediate state being, you know, because that still has an impact on that being's consciousness, right? It's true, right? If people care for us, then we feel automatically a little bit more positive, right? So that's exactly the same what we try to accomplish when a person is in this intermediate state. We try to do positive things, or think positive about that person, and do positive things for that person. And that's why we always engage in practices. And then every 7 days, there's that consciousness can die in the bardo. Yeah, so every 7 days we do something special, up till 49 days. Yeah, so we talked about that last time with the vision of air by Plato. Plato in the vision of air also talks exactly about 7 days. It was very interesting, you know. And then in the Jewish tradition, then also they talk about Shiva, right? The 7 days of doing something for those who passed away. So it's very interesting that in various cultures, they talk about the same amount of days for doing something for the deceased, you know? Yeah. So in Buddhist aspects of the Abhidharma literature, for example, it says 7 days, and if there's no rebirth for that particular individual, then there's another 7 days up till normally 49 days. Yeah, so that's kind of an aspect, 49 days, but it's probably most likely not fixed, because if you study Stevenson research on children remembering previous lifetimes, then you can calculate, right? You know, the time of death of that individual in the case studies, for example, you know, the time of death, and you know the birth date. Yeah, so then you can calculate the amount of time in the womb, and then you know more or less how much time is spent between two lives. You know, so then it's very interesting actually to relate that evidence with what we say in the Buddhist scriptures, because there are also scriptures in Buddhism in the Sakya tradition, for example. One of the Vajrayana texts talks about that there might be exceptions to those 49 days. Yeah. So anyway, it's just in detail, but it doesn't have to be 49 days. It can also be 7, or it can also be 1, or it can also be a second. Yeah, that all depends on causes and conditions. Nothing is fixed, right? So our lifespan is not fixed. The time in the bardo is not fixed. Yeah, it all depends on a very complex system of cause and effects. Yeah, cause and effect relationships. So then you die and you go into the bardo, and then you're reborn, right? So that process of going into the bardo and being reborn, that process depends on previous causes that causes the result to come about, right? So whatever the minds we generate, we create causes for future moments of consciousness. Yeah, because every moment of consciousness is preceded by a previous moment of consciousness. Yeah. So that being the case, every moment of consciousness is preceded by a previous moment. That means the future levels of consciousness depend on the present. Yeah, so that comes to the idea that we have to develop our mind in order to create right causes for future events to happen according to our wish, right? Yeah, so in Buddhism, we say there is no self or a kind of controller that is in charge, you know? If that's possible, then we would be in charge with sickness, or we would be in charge with not dying, but that's not the case. Everything is just pure by the power of cause and effect relationships. Nothing is random. Everything can be explained from cause and effect relationships, right? So if that's the case, if there's no controller, or there's no creator, or as such, it's only the continuity of consciousness, then you just create causes for future events, and then those future events will come into being. Yeah, because it's a cause and effect relationship. You know? There's a law of reality. In a similar way, you put a seed on the table, nothing will happen. But if I put a seed with some soil and I put some water with it, then it can grow into a plant, right? So that's exactly the same cause and effect relationships, although that's a materialistic or some matter, some physical things, but our mind is very, very similar, right? That the cause and effect relationships are there. And then later on, we will discuss, why is there no controller? Why is there no person in charge? Because if you look, where is that person? Or where is that controller? If you look in your body, in your mind, you can really find it, right? So we come to that a little bit later. So then proves that that's only cause and effect relationship. And then you go into the bardo, and then you go into the next life. Yeah. So that process of rebirth, or the continuity of consciousness, we talked about a few times before, that there's consciousness not depending on the brain. Yeah, like a near-death experience, for example, or the children who remember previous lifetimes, there's information carried from the previous personality to the present. Yeah, so children remembering previous lifetime is one thing, but then having a birthmark of the cause of death of the previous personality is statistically seeing very, very solid evidence, right? So Stevenson did incredible research over 40 years, with 2,000 cases. You know, if you read the books were a bit made, especially Jim Tucker's books, Life After Life, for example, is a very interesting summary of Stevenson research. Yeah? Jim Tucker was one of the students of Stevenson. Jim Tucker and Life After Life, he's also made his documentary on Netflix, right? Surviving Death. It's very interesting. It's a bit made popular and a bit in the story. The scientific evidence is not that clear in the documentary, but if you look at the actual case studies, for example, of the University of Virginia, it's very interesting research. You know, then there's not only the memory of a previous state of existence, but also in quite a few cases, a birthmark of the cause of death of the previous personality, right? A shot wound is and then the child has a particular birthmark, and you look in the police reports of the previous personality of the picture of the shot wound, you know, very, very interesting cases, you know. Yeah. So that research is quite solid, you know, although for mainstream neuroscientists it's quite difficult to look at. And yeah, of course, everybody has their own interpretations about things, but yeah, that's what Stevenson says. I'm not proving reincarnation, but there is something that carries information from a previous personality to the present, right? And that's exactly what we call the continuity of consciousness. Yeah, and that's very essential in the Buddhist teachings, because in the Buddhist teaching we talk a lot about rebirth and the 6 realms of existence. Yeah, so we have the higher rebirths of the humans and gods, and lower rebirths of animals and spirits and kasa, help beings. You know, so that's, yeah, we cannot see spirits and help beings and gods, but does that mean they don't exist? That's the question, right? Animals and humans, we know they exist, but sometimes a particular creature, then if somebody down in the ocean, you know, sometimes you find this very funny kind of little sentient beings, right? If a person shows us a picture something, then initially we think, that's strange, right? And if you think about being in another planet, yeah, what do you think? Is there life or not? If you look at the stars at night, you see there's no end to the universe, right? There's no boundary to the universe. It's not, it ends here and ends there. And beyond that, what's there? There's nothing like that. There's no end. The universe is infinite. Same as also our consciousness is there since beginningless lifetime. And there's no end. Same as the universe. This for us quite difficult to comprehend, because we always think in boundaries, you know, all the time. You know? But if you look at the sky and you think there is no end, there's not beyond this Milky Way, then it stops. It's not like that. There's no end, right? So that means that maybe, most likely, there are other planets, maybe a bit further away, with similar forms of life. And those species, they look completely different than us. It's not that everybody has to look exactly the same as us, and the animals should be exactly the same as we have on this planet. that's probably not the case, right? So when we see those creatures, we think, oh, wow, how is that possible? That's scary. And those creatures look at us and think, whoa, those earthlings, they're funny people. Yeah. Because if you see things for the first time, it's all a bit kind of, ooh, you know, strange. Yeah, so that, and then don't believe it, because our mind is not really thinking about the possibility of infinite universe, of existence on other planets, and they might look completely different from the humans. Of course they will be different, because the causes and conditions on their planet will not be exactly the same as our planet, right? Yeah, so even on our planet we have various species, depending on various you know, aspects in climate differences and habitat, you know. So that's why there's all kind of various pieces. So in a similar way, if you die and your consciousness goes, then this body is just a temporary thing. And then you take an aspect of a more subtle body, right? Yeah, so there's kind of a spirit-like body, basically, so then you can think, oh, maybe that's possible or not. Yeah, anyway, that's a little bit homework for yourself to to examine if that's all true what we talk about here, because it's important to check it out. You don't believe because the Buddha said so. That's not correct. Or Tenzin Namdak, he studied for 2 decades. He should know. Don't think like that, right? That's not the right approach in Buddhism. You should check it out. Is this true or not? And what are the reasons for it to be true or not true? Yeah, that's very, very important to check things out. Yeah, so then we talk about 6 realms of existence, for example, right? The lower realms of the animals, the spirits and the help beings, and then we have the humans and the different gods, Same as in the Hindu philosophy, they talk about Indra, Brahma, Ishvara, As Buddhists, we accept those. There are living beings. They exist, right? In Buddhism, we accept them, right? So that means there are different levels of God realms where you have various gods as well, similar as we have humans and spirits, So there's also how to create the causes to be born there. We even talk about that, right, in the Buddhist scriptures. So yeah, there's a few things to contemplate these aspects, because to understand samsara, what it actually is, the different realms of existence and how you can go around in those realms of existence is quite an essential aspect of Buddhism. So we can maybe try to discover that aspect as it is discovering Buddhism, or try to question it, right? Is it possible or not? And if so, how? What are the causes to be born here and there? That's very important for us to know, even of humans, If you think about, okay, I believe or I accept the continuity of consciousness. I accept there's no beginning and there's no end, right? If you accept that aspect, then the question is, okay, then you go on this planet. Do you think you've always been born human? And you say yes, then I will ask you, what about 40,000 years ago, right? Then there were no humans as we have at the moment on this planet. They think, yeah, 40,000 years ago, that's a long time. But, but the continuity of consciousness is without beginning, right? So that's beyond billions of years, So then you think, okay, if I'm always being human, then I go back 40,000 years, and then there were no humans like we have now. And on other planets, there might be different types of beings. And we were kind of ape-like at that time on this planet. So, then maybe that's a possibility, right? And then you go before the apes, and then, yeah, if you just only look at this planet, on this planet, then you see there's a continuity of consciousness which can take various forms, right? Or on other planets, we have all these pictures sometimes you see popping up in certain kind of social media or popular, what is it, news of aliens looking like this, looking like that. But yeah, of course, I mean, just by power of reasoning, of course they will look different from us. We have so many species on this planet, so variety of various species. So in other planets, there's no reason why it's exactly the same, right? That's to have exactly the same conditions as on this planet is just impossible, right? So it then gives us an idea that there are various possibilities of being reborn in various states of existence, Yeah. So yeah, that's why it's so important at a time of death to create the right courses for the next life. Yeah, because there's a possibility of being born in various states of existence, and certain states of existence are maybe not that good to be born in. Think about the animal realm, not about our pets. The cats and dogs, they're sometimes better off than certain humans in certain situations, right? But but if you look at the casa, The wild animals, you know, and you really look what happens there, you know, it's very sad, you know, eating each other just to fill the stomach. They kill another being to get food in the stomach, you know, it's very sad, you know. And then, you know, the fear all the time, you know, so much fear. You sometimes see little creatures like little birds. I sometimes do retreats, and then mostly I observe the animals rather than sitting and meditate. So once I was in the north doing some retreat, and then put some some biscuits for the birds, you know, when it was cold weather and everything. And then all the birds from the whole village came, I think. So it was quite a few. and then you can see, you know, some of the very tiny ones, they eat it. Look. There's just so much fear in aspects of living, you know. So that if you really observe animals very carefully, you can see there's a lot of suffering there. Eating each other. If you've been eaten alive, how does that feel? You know, that's quite something sad happening. And then fighting over food, or fighting over territory, or just killing each other, right? It's a very kind of a rough kind of life, you know. So if you're born in one of those states, then that's pretty serious forms of suffering. And not only serious form of suffering, you also habituate your mind with those activities to more negativity, right? So the more habituation you build up, the more difficult it will become to get out of that situation, you know. So that's why we sometimes contemplate in the Buddhist context. We first, just to get the structure clear, we first contemplate what we did before, the precious reliance on a teacher, right, as an external condition. Then we contemplated the inner condition of the precious human rebirth, yeah, and then we meditate on death and impermanence to take the essence, right, and then the next level, as we're going to discuss in the coming models, is to see if you die and you're born in lower states of existence. That's very difficult. That's very difficult to get out of those low states of existence, one thing, and there's a lot of suffering, another thing, and you cannot develop your mind if you're born in animal realm, right? This is impossible for an animal. Of course, you can teach a dog how to lead a blind person, which is quite amazing, you know. And of course, the dog does amazing work, but for animals, it's very difficult to generate kind of constructive forms of thinking, you know, especially in the wild animals, you know. So then you think, oh, I have to make sure I'm not reborn in those states, you know. And then you say to the Buddha, please help, right? So what will the Buddha say? The Buddha doesn't say, oh, you take this pill and you'll be fine. That's not going to happen. The Buddha says, I cannot hold your hand and prevent you from going into states of existence, but I can show you how to do it. You have to do it yourself, because everything is cause and effect relationships, right? And then the Buddha says, okay, there's this law of cause and effect that we're going to talk about in the next model. And if you live in accordance with the law of cause and effect in a positive way, then you create the right causes for future states of existence. So that means that the Buddha then says, practice morality. Because if you practice morality, you abandon negative deeds. If you abandon negative deeds, you don't create negative habituation patterns, which can ripen into these negative states. You know, so it's practicing morality is a very sophisticated practice that the Buddha gave to us to say, okay, you abandon negativities, negative karma, so you not be born in places with a lot of negativities, because the more you habituate yourself to negativities, then that habituation pattern can carry on, right? So then the Buddha said, okay, practice morality. So morality is, in that case, the cause for a precious human rebirth, as we talked about before, right? So morality, together with the stainless prayer, is the right cause for obtaining again a precious human rebirth in the future. Yeah. So that comes from these kind of contemplations, right? So you see there's a structure in these models and in what we call the lamrim, or the stages of the path to enlightenment. First, you see the external condition, the teacher and the teachings, and then you see internal kind of kasa potential of the precious human rebirth and Buddha potential. And then you see, oh, this life is not going to last forever. I better take action. I better do something. And then you contemplate what happens after that. Yeah, then you contemplate the suffering of the lowest states of existence, and then you generate a wish. Oh, that's not a very wise direction to go. I should do something about it. And then you ask the Buddha what to do. And then the Buddha said, okay, I cannot hold your hand, but I can show you how the law of cause and effect works. That's what the Buddha says. There's a law of reality we cannot escape, right? We know that anger produces suffering, that there's more CO2 in the atmosphere, heats up the planet. We cannot change that law, right? We cannot change that anger produces suffering and that CO2 produces the heating of the planet. But we can prevent ourselves from getting angry, and we can, if we're lucky, put less CO2 in the atmosphere, that the heating up process is not that severe, right? So that we can play with cause and conditions, but we cannot change a particular law of reality. And that's with karma, our continuity of consciousness, exactly the same. Yeah? Karma, as we're going to discuss in the next model, from a scientific point of view, if you take science into account, in particular quantum mechanics and biology, then karma makes a lot of sense, because you talk about probabilities and potentials that creates the future, or information that is carried over time, as we talk about in biology and talk about in quantum mechanics, that this information that is carried over time is basically in the materialistic way, in the physical world happening, but also in the world of consciousness is happening, right? So that interdependence in the law of cause and effect in the world of consciousness, that's exactly what we call karma, right? So karma is not something magical or something like that. It's just the cause and effect relationships. That's what it is. So yeah, just as a preliminary to next week, then you get, I hope, a little bit excited about this kind of karma aspect, But yeah, there's a kind of, joking aside, it's a very, really, if you really think about karma well, and you use other forms of philosophy of different schools of Buddhist philosophy to see what karma actually is. And then you talk with scientists, right? You talk with biologists, you talk with quantum physicists, with neuroscientists, then you see, wow, this is a kind of a universal kind of aspect of reality, so it's not something magical that only is there in spiritual practice or something like that. It's just a reality for everybody, right? Cause and effect relationships we cannot escape. Nobody can escape cause and effect. Yeah, the laws of reality, or what we just talked about, that we cannot change those laws, but we can live accordance to those laws and create the right causes to produce the right results, right? So that's exactly what karma is all about. So this is a very, this is kind of my sales talk for the next model on karma. Yeah, okay, that brings us exactly to 3 minutes after 8. Yeah. So if there's any questions, then we are ready for an answer, maybe. Yeah.
Okay, why don't we start in the Gompa? Does anyone in the Gompa have any questions for Geshe? No. All clear here then.
Yeah. Oh, but online is kind of so many hands.
We've got a few hands online, so let's have a look. Abelardo, I think you were first. Do you want to unmute and ask a question?
Yes, thank you, Geshe. I sometimes have internal struggles when I meditate, and when I try to define my aspirations in life and for after the next life. On the one hand, there's a wish of renunciation. I find samsara very ambivalent, but the negative part is so so bad and it's getting worse. And so I said, no, I want to get, I don't want to come back here, at least this planet. But then on the other hand, I tried to cultivate bodhicitta and the wish to, to reach enlightenment, to help all sentient beings. And then I become aware of the path of the bodhisattva who can choose rebirth as a tulku and come back willingly. When His Holiness Dalai Lama came to Costa Rica in 1989, we took him to talk to the priests and the seminarians at the main seminary institution in Costa Rica. And someone asked him, what do you think about Jesus Christ? And he said, well, he was a great bodhisattva in our view. So that was a beautiful answer for a Catholic country. So anyway, my question basically is, how can one direct one's aspirations and meditations resolve this inner conflict and have a clean, let's say, path?
Yeah, a perfect one.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're not perfect yet, right? So that means that we try to do our best, and then afflictions come back, negative thoughts come back. That's going on for quite some lifetimes, unfortunately. You have to be realistic, right? That we train our mind, and then it's like this, you go up, but it's a little bit up and down, right? Eventually you reach, but we still go up and down, so that's kind of, we just have to carry on with this kind of aspiration, and sometimes things go worse, sometimes things go better, but that's the nature of reality. Yeah, as long as you keep going, then eventually you reach your goal, and then eventually you generate bodhicitta as a realization, an uncontrived kind of state of mind that will be with you without degeneration. And then you can benefit beings like His Holiness or Jesus Christ or whatsoever, whatever is beneficial for a particular society. You take a particular aspect and teach that society that particular teaching. Yeah, so it's just a matter of fact of keep going. Yeah, that's what it is. And if things are going a bit difficult sometimes, then try to see that, okay, this is the ripening of negative karma. I still haven't completely purified myself. Of course, these possibilities are there. And then see that as a purification practice and think, great, a negative thought, right? Or great sickness, or yeah, amazing opportunity, especially with bodhicitta, when we're going to talk about later. If you use it in the Tonglen, then, a real master is just waiting for obstacles, basically, to purify and put them into the path, right? Because if you can take difficulties into the path, like negative thoughts or sickness or obstacles in general, then if you can do that, then from now until infinite in the future, then you go in the right direction, because you're just purifying things, but you keep going, right? So that's kind of a few things to contemplate, but we're going to talk about it much more in the model on bodhicitta and mind training, right? And these things will be more clear. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Not only 2 years of discovering Buddhism, but until enlightenment is achieved. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Bye.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I think next was Jeff. Jeff, do you want to answer your question?
Yes. Yes, so thank you for the teachings, Geshe. I feel every week my mind is expanded a bit further.
Ale, expanding universe. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, exactly. I wanted to mention about some of the, say, for end-of-life experiences, the deathbed visions. It's sometimes it's said that people see dead relatives that come to help them make the transition, or people who have near-death experiences may say that they sometimes, well, they might meet spiritual beings or sort of higher spiritual beings, or they might sometimes meet dead relatives. And I wondered how, within the Buddhist teachings, if there's any kind of way that could be interpreted. Thank you.
I have thought about it quite a lot, actually, and discussed it with a few of my teachers as well, because we see it occurring in most cases of a near-death experience and in deathbed visions. You know? So it could be, I mean, it could be, for example, there's one very interesting case in the US that a brother and a sister, they both had an accident, right? And the brother did come back with CPR, he had cardiac arrest. But when he was in this near-death experience, he met his sister, and his sister said, "I have to go, I cannot come back." So then he told his parents, and his parents couldn't believe that his sister also had an accident. They didn't know at that time. So they called and then noticed that her daughter passed away. So in that way, there might be a communication between the two types of consciousness on a subtler level, right? So that we can, from a Buddhist point of view, completely also, you know, accept and reason the reasons why. You know? Then if you see, for example, dead relatives, it might be a dead relative in the aspect of the previous personality of a bardo being. That is one possibility, maybe, right? That the bardo being appears, because also how things appear to our mind also depends on our kind of mental states and on our kind of expectations and our imprints, right? So that's another thing to think about, that beings of the bardo can maybe appear in that form of how we used to see that person. So that can be another explanation. Also, it can be a spirit that is in that being's form, or that person who passed away is living in that same form in a particular spirit realm or something like that. There's another possibility, right? Yeah, and or it can also be an aspect of the person who passed away and knows is going to die, and relation with the dying, there's a prediction aspect of knowing that you're going to die because you see dead relatives. Yeah, so that could be just a part of like what we have in a dream consciousness. Yeah, so there's most likely various possibilities. That it's not that, I don't think there's one explanation for all, because everything is depending on many causes and conditions. So there could be various explanations for various cases, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Yeah. Something to, food for thought. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Okay, I think there's just... Sorry, Alejandro, I think you were next.
Yeah.
Thank you, Geshe. Thank you for the teaching. I have more than 2 questions, but I will wait for the question and answer the next Thursday. I think it is, I believe.
Yeah, later we do it. The Spanish group later we do. I think Conchi sent you or sent the people already the dates, because next week we don't have the discussion, right? Next week go straight into karma, because I have to go somewhere else in November. Yeah.
Well, the question that in my list, the most important that kind of like is wondering about in my mind is in the third route that or conclusion that we have to come on the meditation death is that only the mental training or the Dharma will help you at the time of the death, because it's not material. And my question is, what kind of cause is more important, or action or karma in the time of the death, that determines one place of rebirth or another? Is it a big like action that you do, like for example in a positive way, like you do like a very huge donation to to your guru, or you kill someone, and this has a very like deep imprint in your mental consciousness? Or is it the habitual patterns that determines where you're going after?
Yeah.
What is more important in those 2 cases?
Do you have to choose one or not? I mean, the main thing that happens is not the action you do at a time of death, but the state of mind you have at the time of death, because the state of mind you have at the time of death can activate activities you've done before, right? Either positive or negative, depending on the state of mind. So that why when maybe in the dying process or somebody else is in a dying process, we try to enhance positive states of thinking in that individual, right? Or in our own mind when we're dying, because that activates previous forms of karma. Yeah. So in the 12 links, for example, and we will discuss later, this process is very clearly described that in life and previous lifetimes, we create this kind of throwing karma, right? Or propelling karma that can throw you in another rebirth, either positive or negative. And that gets activated at the time of death. Yeah, so there's a potential sitting there, and then like a seed sitting there on the table, nothing will happen. But when the right conditions come, like a mind that thinks similarly, or a mind that is in accordance with that activity you've done before, either positive or negative, and then that triggers it, and that actually activates it, like the seed coming together with fertilization and moisture, and then it grows, right? So that's we're going to describe later on in the 12 links when we talk about samsara and nirvana, for example. Yeah, samsara, that's one model about that.
But in the what triggers that karma at the time of death, is it like what is more important? What kind of karma is more important?
Yeah, of course, the positive karma in general is the best important to be activated, you know. So what is positive karma? Then one you already indicated yourself, you make an offering, or can be an offering to a good organization, for example. Yeah, that's what we do in a traditional Buddhist tradition, so to say. Then we give away our possessions, and we give it away to communities who engage in spiritual practice, you know. So that's kind of a way to make some merit, and then you dedicate that merit for good rebirth in order to develop, in order to achieve liberation and enlightenment, for example. Yeah, so you can do various activities, but we have done so many activities in previous lifetimes, and that also we have to activate, right? So it's just the thing that activates those activities is the state of mind at the time of death. Yeah, so that's the crucial thing. Yeah, but before dying, it's good to do some virtuous activities, and in traditional way, we purify our mistakes before we die, you know, to do some purification practice, as we're going to talk about in the next model in karma, the possibility of purification, yeah, and the accumulation of merit and doing good things. And then you move in a particular direction, and then it's easier to the more you habituate your mind in this life to positive thinking, then when you die, it's much easier, right? Yeah. You cannot say, oh, I'm going to enjoy my life the best way I can, and then when I die, then I think about it. Yeah. Then when you die, then also you think about an aspect of life, and that might not. Yeah. So you have to start today, right? To habituate yourself to positive things, and then the stronger the habituation is, the easier it will become. The more potentials we have of a particular habituation, that's easier to grow, right? The more potentials you have, the bigger the chance. And we see exactly the same thing happening in neuroscience, for example. The more, in one aspect of neuroscience, the more neurotransmitters are being released in relation with a particular activity or thought, there's the highest probability for some of those those activities of release of these, what do you say? So if you, there's one aspect of neuroscience when there's a release of neurotransmitters, you know, and then if you have a lot of probabilities or a lot of release of neurotransmitters in relation to one particular thought or one particular activity, then there's a higher chance for that to come into being, right? And it's exactly with karma, exactly the same. The more potentials you have, the easier it will be for one of those potentials to ripen. So the more positive habituation we have, the easier it will become for one of those positive things to ripen, right? So that's kind of the power of habituation. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, there was one more or not?
Yeah, Geshe, there's just one in the chat.
Okay.
It's a question about the meditation we did today. It says how someone who experiences occasional panic attacks could do this meditation. Is there any preliminary meditation to prevent the occurrence or the possibility of a panic attack?
Yeah. So that the panic attack is based on a kind of misunderstanding of reality, right? You expect something that might be not the case. So then before the panic attack happens, you have to just try to contemplate. First of all, you have to train yourself how to make your mind calm, because when the mind is not calm, we cannot think properly, right? And then these kind of panic attacks or anxiety that takes over the mind, and then we're beyond control, right? So one aspect is generate a mind in a more calmness. So for example, the concentration meditation we do, yeah, that helps us to get a calmer mind and to direct our thoughts, you know. But if you train with concentration meditation in alertness and mindfulness, yeah, you be capable over time to recognize the different thoughts. Same with a panic attack or anxiety. It starts somewhere, right? It starts with a very small thought, and then it grows and grows and grows and grows, and it takes over. So before it takes over, we can still take action. When it takes over, it's too late, right? Then it's better to try to talk with the person or go for a walk or do something that distracts you a little bit from the thought, right? But when it's in its initial stages, you can still do something. You can direct with alertness. You recognize, oh, there's something sneaking coming there, yeah. And with mindfulness, you remember the contemplation you did, that following this thought is not really constructive, you know. So that's a way when you train in those two mental factors to direct your thoughts. You want the thoughts you want to think. Yeah, that's also very clearly been proven in the research on obsessive compulsive disorder, for example. Yeah, if you're interested, then you should read a book called The Mind and the Brain. Yeah, there's a book, The Mind and the Brain by Jeffrey Schwartz. It's very, very good, you know. So Jeffrey Schwartz in this book, The Mind and the Brain, talks about the power of mental force. Yeah, he is a medical doctor, and he saw that medication didn't always solve the problem of these issues, right? And then he did a lot of mental training with his patients, and then trained them in the power of mental force. Actually, it's talking about alertness and mindfulness, then to teach the patient to structure the way of thinking, or to teach the patient to pay attention to certain thoughts and not pay attention to other thoughts. Yeah, so that's kind of based on what we call these two mental factors, that you can actually direct your thoughts. Yeah, that's a very slow process. Yeah, that's not going to happen overnight, but there's a possibility. And he just accomplished quite a bit in that kind of direction. You know, it's a very interesting book, The Mind and the Brain by Jeffrey Schwartz. Yeah, he did very interesting work. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So just one final point on that one, Geshe, is if you were a person who were prone to panic attacks, is there another meditation you should do, or is this a meditation that's suitable to you? The one we did today.
The one we did today, meaning the concentration meditation, right? The concentration meditation we did that will produce, because the mind gets calmer, right? So then you're more aware of what's going on inside your mind. When you start meditating a little bit more, you will see there's more thoughts than before. That's a good sign, because before we were not aware of those thoughts. And that's the problem, because if we're not aware of those thoughts, then those thoughts just take over, you know. So first of all, we get awareness of the thoughts by the power of this concentration meditation. Yes, kind of concentration meditation, the mind becomes more like a mirror, right? If you have a kind of a quiet lake somewhere in the Alps, you know, in the early morning, everything reflects in this lake. It's like a mirror, you know. But if you have disturbing thoughts like we have in the North Sea, and with a storm, then it's very disturbing. You don't see anything, you know. So that's exactly with our mind, you know. If you train your mind in concentration meditation, your mind becomes calm, because you stop all the thoughts, right? You stop the thoughts of the past and the future, and you're only in the present, you know. And then things reflect, and you become more sensitive, you know. in seeing things, in hearing things, and also knowing your own mind better and seeing the little subtle thoughts that come and go, which otherwise you would never recognize. And that's important, because if you can recognize the initial thought pattern developing, you can tackle it. If it's too strong and too late, then better go for a walk, talk with the person, try to get out of this train, and that's the only thing you can do. But if you become more aware with this concentration meditation, you see the thoughts coming in the initial stages, and then you can apply the antidote. You can think, oh, I'm not going to follow this because it's going to bring me in this strain again, right? And then with alertness, you see that initial thought coming, and then with mindfulness, you remember your contemplation of that is leading to a misunderstanding of reality and actually causing us to suffer, right? So same what we did with the meditation on the faults of anger and the benefits of patience. Then as soon as a little bit irritation is coming, you apply the antidotes. So that is only possible when you really know what's going on inside your mind, and that you can only accomplish with getting a calmer mind. Getting a calmer mind and producing this calmer mind with this kind of concentration meditation. Yeah. So give it a try, but yeah, I don't guarantee big results within a few weeks, right? That it will take months to go over. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Geshe.
Yeah.
There's one more.
Yeah. Okay.
As a Western person,
yeah,
how could we develop the certainty that our consciousness continues after death?
Yeah. I'm also a Western person, actually. I also had my doubts, really. You know, when I was studying Brahmanavartika, a text, the second chapter on Brahmanavartika on the continuity of consciousness, right? I was also thinking that's very good logic, but is there more? And then I started reading the science on children remembering previous lifetimes and need that experience. And then it's not just reading it, but thinking about it. That's the thing, right? We have to analyze, is this true or not? And then only your conviction becomes stronger. Yeah, we talked about, if you talk about faith in Buddhism is not blind belief, right? Faith in Buddhism is based on reasoning. Yeah, very, very solid reasoning. And that's the only way you get conviction, because that's how our mind functions. The more we reason, the more we believe that reason, the more we get convinced, right? Yeah, so there's just a matter of habituation over time, because we never thought about it before, and now we just heard about it. So try to think about it more and try to analyze it more if you wish. And then over time, this faith and conviction in this law of cause and effect becomes stronger. And then especially when we talk about later on in discovering Buddhism, we talk about emptiness. Yeah, next year we're going to dive into this reality, ultimate reality. So the more you understand emptiness or interdependence, then it all starts to make sense. This law of reality, of cause and effect. Yeah, so yeah, I would say just hang in there for another, what is it, 1 year plus, and then yeah, we go over those points, and then you put it all together, because then you get the all overview, and then you just analyze it again and again, back and forth, and then clarity comes. And then over time, the conviction comes, right? It's nothing happens overnight, you know. To change your mind is not easy, and it takes time, right? So just take it easy, relax, and think about it now and then slowly we move the right direction. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay, that's a perfect ending, happy end, so to say. Yeah, I like happy ends. So next week, right, we don't have the discussion. People know that, I think. Yeah, so next week we just have class, and then we have 3 evenings left for the classes on karma. Yeah, and then we have the discussions after that, because I have to go to some other place on the planet to give another course. Yeah. So yeah, okay. So let's dedicate then the merits of contemplating these aspects of death and dying and generating good states of mind. Yeah. So try to think oneself and all sentient beings to develop their minds all the way up to yeah, sustainable of ultimate happiness and liberation and enlightenment. Dagi jin sabe ngewa di noa gundang gambe Geba Jetsun Lozan Japa Yi Tembe Ningo Ringu Zanje. May the glorious Guru's life be long and stable. May all beings equal in space and happiness. May I and others, without exception, accumulate merit and purifying activities, and may we be blessed to quickly attain Buddha. Janjo, Samjo, Rinpoche, Magye Panam, Giguchi, Yeba, Nyamba, Meba, Gone, Gonde, Bewa, Sho, Tony, Tawa, Rinpoche, Magye Panam, Giguchi, Yeba, Nyamba, Meba, Gone, Gonde, Bewa, Sho. Okay, then see you next week. Yeah, okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.